So, first cab off the rank today, we are just going to have a quick look at the War of Nova referral campaign. And as we've mentioned before, warofnova.com, put in some account details, put in the referral code join_Nova, and you can add to the number of people that we are trying to get to reach our next milestone. We need 182 more people. The current referral code counts 1,318, which is pretty good going. That means we're going to have an exciting season ahead with plenty of active players. So at the moment, what are we going to get? We're going to get 3 rare officers, 1 epic officer, and at the moment just 1,250 gold credits here. Not to be sniffed at, you know, that's nice. 1,500 would be nicer. 2,000 and an extra epic officer, that would be fantastic. But I don't somehow think in the day and a half we've got that we're going to, before the season starts, that we're going to reach that. It would be nice. So if you haven't done it yet, go to warofnova.com and then go up to the account settings in the very top right of this, register, go into your account, and then simply plop in the referral code join_Nova. I'm pretty sure that's the right one, otherwise I'm going to have to re-record this all over again, and I really do not want to have to do that. So without further ado, we'll get into the real nitty-gritty of things with the season coming up and have a little look at more bits and pieces about how we're going to set ourselves up, what we're looking to do in the first sort of 24, 48 hours maybe, a little bit about the groups that are coming in, good start zones and so on. So here we go. Let's just minimize me down a little bit. We'll go up into the top corner and we'll get on with it. So first thing I really want to do and have a quick look at is the various start zones, and we've obviously got we're all familiar now with the 8 factions we've got around here. All are not quite created equal, and for that reason some of the stronger guilds will have already chosen where they want to go. I do know that the Zorro guild, who are currently in Ograx, will probably go there again. They have done for the last 2 seasons, and almost certainly the strongest guild in the game with the highest spend overall. This particular map, the season we're in, doesn't really do them justice. They've decided to sort of sit in these zones for most of the season and not play until such time as the crypto side of things is integrated into the season. We're looking at the possibility that may come perhaps a few weeks into the season. It's still being tested, and it's being tested. It's in quality assurance at the moment, I believe. So we're hoping that might get introduced partway through the season. So that's something to look forward to if you're into that side of things. If you're not, maybe try and have a look into it. It's worth doing. Free stuff basically. All you got to do is hook up a wallet to your crypto wallet to your War of Nova account in that warofnova.com area we looked at earlier. So kind of looking forward to seeing how that pans out, and I'm sure these guys here from Zora are very much looking forward to that. Expect them to probably dominate the early game at least. Next up we've got probably Arcos will be CMPS again, I think. I'm not quite sure how they stand in terms of comparing with some of the newer guys coming in the other servers 2 and 3. I believe that Tower might be joining us over here in Arcos. They're currently the guys running in Tyrannus. Made some pretty good mates there, so it'd be nice to actually have a full guild for once. Perhaps, I say that, I don't think there's any chance of a merge at this stage, but who knows, as the season goes on it may be decided to all go into the same guild. We'll take that as it comes. Met some really nice guys in there, looking forward to that very much, and to playing alongside you, whether it's inside or outside our own CMPS guild. That'd be great. As far as I'm aware, there's 2, possibly 3 other quite large Rise to War guilds coming in. I'm not sure where they'll choose to go. I'm hoping it's probably not Ograx or Arcos, simply because that's going to get very crowded and going to cause issues with resources early on. So we'll just wait and see on that. And in terms of actually choosing a start faction, there is probably now not much to choose from between 6 of these out of the 8 factions, with perhaps Omega and Stoner being the kind of outliers that are not going to do so well. But equally, it's likely that given the number of big guilds involved in this server, hopefully we'll come to sort of some arrangement whereby the slightly smaller guilds who may end up well in Omega and Stoner can do something between themselves and have their own little battle, whatever going on. Who knows? We did have some options in this server to kind of do friendly PvP and go a bit easier on some of the lower level players and have them do their own thing. This really is season 3. It's really still kind of a test. It's not been run before this season, so the devs will be looking at seeing what works and what doesn't. And in terms of the actual marketing and full launch of this, I'm not entirely sure if it's going out straight away or if they're going to wait off and hold off a few weeks and see if there's any tweaks that need to be made. So we'll just wait and see. We're all in this together. There's no point us all beating up on each other and getting mean and nasty with each other in these situations. We just got to wait and see. The devs are doing a great job. They're moving at speed. It may not always look like it, but they're trying to sort out the foundations of it before they start adding in all the nice to haves. I do think, however, we've been promised emojis, which is quite nice, and I'm looking forward to the idea that I may actually be able to play this on a tablet fairly soon. So kind of looking forward to that. We'll just go in shortly and have a quick look in one of the discords and just see what's been promised and get some views on that. I've also got a few views on what I'd like to see coming in, and then we'll move on to faction by faction, having a look at what the starting ships are like, what the sort of pros and cons of those are. First of all, we're talking early PvE. What sort of ships do we want to be using? Well, the kind of kings of the early PvE in this as the Sunder and the Moonveil. Sunder here for various reasons, but it's really to do with we get this one allied unit recovering 80% hit points upon dealing damage. So if you can pick up strike craft that have got a follow-up attack or a counter attack or something like that, then they're getting a huge amount of heals, and that's really what makes this very special. Add that into the fact that it then actually does a decent bit of damage itself as a capital ship, and you're going to get a lot of draws with this ship, but you're not going to get too many losses, so that's why people really rate this. And similarly for Moonveil, there's quite a lot of let's just find one here. I don't have it myself. There's a lot of heals going in, so round 3 allied close range strike craft recover 30% triggers on this round. We've got 2 allied units, 35% of chance of recovering. That'll go up to 45% hit points when receiving a standard attack. That'll increase to 50% at max. And then if you've got Terror and Eldrin strike craft, you've got some extra bonuses here. So all in all, it's got some pretty good healing going on in there. What else is there to look at in terms of the early PvE? We had a great debate about this earlier on in the War of Nova specific Discord today to see what's good and what's not. I quite like Starweaver here, but that's only any good if you've got an officer that actually pumps out healing to start with at the very low level, simply because you just get a boost to your recovery received here. But then you do actually get 2 really decent healing skills here, and it's got some awesome damage, energy and radiation damage that just completely avoids opponent's defense altogether. So that works out very well, and the sort of probably comes into its own from tiles kind of 130 level upwards. What else did we have? Someone, Malarkey, pointed out Hammerhead here, very good apparently. He had some great success with this. What have we got? So we got a 50% chance to recover some allied targets. We get first 3 rounds plus 60% damage. That's fantastic. Chance, and here we get more recovery of hit points. So yeah, that's looking pretty good. I might give that a try actually. I'd just say to him, oh, that's looking pretty handy. Down in the blues, we've got the Emberhelm here. That probably is the best in terms of healing and recovery here. And I've also been told that Radiant's not too shabby either, and that I think I may have mentioned this one before, the Radiant. We do want to get that up early because that's our best siege ship in the game, and so I think I've sort of got mine over the course of the game up to level 30. I've been a bit lazy, I must admit, this season. I haven't been too competitive, but knowing that it's a test season, and that's more to do with the fact that you need to open up this one here, rapid recovery. Now that's got some really good actual damage that goes out with it. It triggers on the first round, and you're actually getting your recovery straight up here as well. The only issue with that is you're not likely to get too much recovery on that first round, because this is actually going to go before any of the strike craft have gone out, so you're not going to be taking a great deal of damage unless you hit something that's hit an enemy ship that goes before you. So you might actually want to be careful with this and not add too much initiative extra to it, and then you might get hit and be able to use the heal. I don't know if it's worth it doing it around that way. Each player needs to decide for themselves. Am I missing anyone that is particularly good? We do want to get here our Kraken up if we can early on, and That is simply because this is a great mining ship. You get resources collected from mining operations increased by 3, so that goes up to 30% at the top level. If you can get it up without too many losses, that's well worth investing something in if you actually have access to it in the first place. Dark Fang can be quite good for early PvE as well. It has got this it's got this recovery down here, so we're looking at up to 80% on one unit, so you only want to mono stack that in the early days. You don't want to be healing anything you don't need to. There have been some PvE build contests earlier on, which in the War of Nova Discord, and it was really good to see people getting involved, coming up with some great builds. The one thing that really sets things off at this level is initiative, and the very, very early hours, if you like, of playing in the new season, you really do want to have that initiative. So I just want to sort of close this one down, and we'll have a quick look at something that's over in one of the War of Nova discords in the resources. So in this section here in War of Nova Discord, as opposed to the Revolving Games one, we've got this other resources by I Just Work Here, or Lady Death if you knew her from Rise to War. And it's really useful because this actually tells us various base stats of each of the ships. So when we're starting out with our rare ships, we've got our rare ones here. We can see that of those rares, the Resolute has initiative of 260, the rest of the sovereign ships have 250, and we come down to the Dominion ships, and we've got Cypher, Darkfang and Omnis also still on 250, and Dread at 240. That initiative is really, really important in the early stages. You really want your capital ship to be going before the enemy, or before the enemies on the tiles initiative is going off, and you're going to be up against predominantly these other rare ships, certainly on the lower level tiles. If you can just get the jump on them by a few initiative points, then that really bodes well for you. And so then what we've got in here is our we've got our Dark Fang here, and then we can select an officer, and here I've just thrown a few random officers in here. Ship power and unit defense +5 +3, but what we then get is here we've got this ship power +7, unit damage +1. Ideally what we want in there is someone that's going to give us some ship initiative. So Ari Astra might be quite good in here if it was if we were doing elemental damage. The alternative to look at down here, and let me just scroll through a bit, we'll find, I think it's Ileana perhaps, and is it in this one? Yeah, now Ileana here gives us a power, elemental and ship initiative, so it's worth actually dropping one of these officers in just to get the jump and stay ahead. Then you can start hitting tiles with slightly higher levels than yourself, because the initiative is going to scale with your level, I believe. And just to come out of there and double check whether that is actually the right information. So my initiative here is now, that's my Elysian. Let's look at my Dark Fang. Gone up to 290 at level 28, whereas it started out in a base of 250. So this will go up, but if you want to hit tiles a few levels higher than yourself, then yeah, for sure, add in an officer that's going to give you that initiative jump. So just a few final thoughts on those officers before we sort of dive into something else. Basically, when you're putting these officers in, what you want to be bearing in mind is that sometimes you might think to yourself, oh, I might just pop in, for instance, a purple officer here with a ship power, ship elementals, and a few bonuses there. But in actual fact, if you've got them available for you, you might be better off with actually putting in one of these blue officers. So they're pushing up specific stats really quite high, and in particular Crasher here gives you unit defense of +15. Now for some of the factions with their starting units have very low defense, this stuff here is gold. So you would probably want to make sure that you're actually putting in the right thing. Don't just immediately think that chucking in single no star purple officer is necessarily going to really give you the boost that you want. And very much you're looking for damage mitigation very early on. You do want to get those defense stats up, unless you happen to have access to medium strikecraft or something like that, which have already got a high defense to start with. So in a little while I'm going to look at each faction. We'll take it faction by faction and look at the first ships that are available. And just bear in mind that the purple is not always the best unless you've got a few stars on it, or it gives you a really good bonus here. So like 16.7% chance to gain confusion immunity. I'm not really even going to bother with that. I don't think we're going to come up against any corruptors early on, for example. So that's just one thing to bear in mind when you're popping those officers in there. But now I'll just go over, I mentioned earlier we would go and have a look at what we're promised for Season 3, what we know is coming so far. So let's go and do that. So what have we got here? What have we got to look forward to? What to expect when the new season begins? UTC time shown in chat user interface. That's fantastic. That means we can actually start timing hits together and everybody knows what they're supposed to be doing and when. You don't have to sort of dig something up on your PC or your phone or whatever to actually tell you what the time is in seconds. So that will be really good. Looking forward to having that. Standard emoji support in chat. Everyone out there's going to be going, yes, no more pushing of that sort of colon and a P to stick your tongue out and so on. We've mentioned it before. That's great. A free battle pass. Superb. Everybody gets a crack at that. Lots of people missed out on completing theirs from certainly servers 2 and 3 in the current season, although they may have actually managed to sort of basically pass them now, or at least get decent way along, because that's been sped up 4 times. Tablet and iPad support, oh my god, thank you so much. I sincerely hope it works. This poor old man with his glasses cannot see his phone and can't play on it, and I've always played these games on tablets. I find it much easier, so thank you. I know there's a lot of other players out there who have been put off because there's not tablet support. Well, I hope you've nailed it, and I'm looking forward to playing on my tablet. And yep, that's right, I can even play while I'm on the bog, so I'm happy as a pig in muck, almost literally. Bug fixes and performance improvements, that's great. Let's see what happens there. That's fairly standard. I would hope to see some of them coming through every week, perhaps. More updates and features will be revealed as we go. So I'm not entirely sure what those updates and features will be, but I can certainly give you an idea of the things that I would like to see. And we'll start off with what I really seriously want more than anything else in the world is a real easy fix. And if we go into these challenges that we get, what I would like to see is these hard and elite challenges, the rewards being, instead of specific to a ship, a text schematic, actually having something that is either specific to just a domain, sovereign or dominion, or just a very generic ship schematic, so epic or legendary. And then that actually enables players really at the lower end of the spectrum to just actually get themselves somewhere close to having an entire new ship by the time they finish these challenges off, or at least maybe get one that they've already got up another mastery level. Give them some options rather than just this. It would take a month of Sundays to more than that. You know, it would take 10 years of Sundays to be able to actually get a ship from these challenges. While we're on the subject of them, just want to point out to people, basically the way these work, you're not going to lose any fuel, you're not going to lose any strike craft when you undertake the challenges. And so when you do them, really just go in, don't try and get a draw is not good enough, you need a win. So just go all out with as much firepower as you can in the first few rounds, and you might find yourself getting through them fairly quickly. I think I went in with a Sunder and some Ravens on it, which are a T2 unit, and we were sort of nailing pretty much most of the easy and the mediums by definitely the end of day 2. And that's great for all these bonus resources, so you know, focus on those if you can. I'd also like to see in the early stages, the first 24 hours or even the first 48 hours, some better bonuses for the season opening. I mean, if you're anyone like me, I've conditioned my family for the last 9 years that on season start date I'm not doing anything but the basics. I'm not working on anything, I'm not doing any projects, and you'd be lucky if I actually cook dinner, quite frankly. So that's my kind of, if you like, special time that's just for me, and the family accept that, and that's great. So personally, I'd actually like to see more bonuses at the beginning. It reduces the grind a little bit later on. It makes sure everyone gets off to a good start. At the moment, all we get is an improved marching speed. other games like this, and I'm not thinking just Rise to War, but I've played multiple games like this over 9 years. Other games will give you either a fuel regeneration rate that's a much quicker, or they might start you off with half price fuel for each of the moves that you want to make. What else have we seen previously? We've seen units destroyed actually just turned into units healed, so we reduce the actual number that are destroyed outright and they'll go into the repair bays, and so you've essentially then got constantly a repair bay and 1 or 2 fabrication bays running, so you can keep those ships pumping out. So those are just a few ideas. I'd really like to see them come in soon. If you can get them in the next day and a half, that would be fantastic. If you've already got them in, perfect, that's ideal. For the kind of die-hard seasonal Geostrat wargaming fans, those are the things we look forward to. Gets us off the ground quicker, means we can get into the real kind of nitty-gritty PvP areas a lot quicker. And for the guys who are probably playing with free-to-play accounts or lower spend accounts, you know, that would be gold if you could reduce that sort of the damages and increase their fuel, especially if they're not playing with that many ships. You know, that would be a real kind of nod to the player base who probably could do with this, even if they're not necessarily shouting out for it. So a few other things while we're on the subject of that. What would be really nice is, this is probably throughout the entire season rather than just at the beginning of the season, is this daily surprise here. It gives out a random item, and honestly, you'd be forgiven for never bothering with that. It's not particularly great. The chapters, on the other hand, they do give out good solid rewards. I actually think that the chapters, they've nailed them pretty well. And for anyone new playing this or new to Nova itself, really complete those chapters early on. That is your quickest way to improving your tile capacity up here, and certainly you want to be doing that as soon as you can. The only other way is to do it through your op tech or operational tech through this core here. And in the early game, you want to be focusing on getting that core up. For me personally, I then prefer to go into expedite, which I won't actually use necessarily that often because I just let things run and forget about them. It would be nice if I didn't. But those ones that only take 5 or 10 seconds to build in the first place, at least you can nail them off pretty quick. I'd personally then go in for overcharge as the next one. I tend to have more ships that are aimed just based off their power rather than their elemental, and elemental damage already does fantastically. Once we've got those done, certainly then coming over into economy, and I might increase the helion limit a couple of points initially, but really we want to open up this mining. And you know, mining is far superior to adding these on. These things here I've only put up, they're the very last thing I've did because I've got everything else already in here. I don't tend to bother with any of that. It's just a waste of time. And the real bonuses start to come when we're kind of getting into integral fuel tanks. That's really what I'm heading for. That's where the real kind of money goes, is we want that lots. And so yeah, basically make sure that you've always got a few points spare, so that when you open up one of these other things like this one here for the Helion reserves, that'll get you basically, they'll come back a little bit quicker. And here for the war games and then combat readiness being opened up, that's useful for getting your radiants and your dreads up to speed if you haven't done them. But integral fuel tanks, that's the big one. Those are the sort of core things we're looking to get into OpTech early on, but basically everything that gives you more tile capacity. So those, going back to it, those chapters, as you go through the various chapters here, you will see you get increased cut tile capacity each chapter you go. Definitely be working towards getting them early on. It's not the type of game where you've got a bonus for not bothering with them, apart from perhaps if you want to build up eventually. I will just go in here and have a quick look inside in the infrastructure. If you want to build up your tech lab, do that as you go along. That's the kind of essential one that just gives you a command boost, means you can put more strike craft actually onto your capital ships or in your battle groups. And now we come to the final piece that we want to talk about. I'm going to go through faction by faction and have a quick look at the first sort of few ships that become available to each faction. And you can then, hopefully I'll give you a few tips really to determine how you might set up your officers on your ships early on to make best advantage of each of these strike craft. But before we do that, we're just going to quickly hop over to the War of Nova Discord once again, because in here we've actually got this kind of other resources which I just work here has put together for all of us, where we can have a quick look at which fabrication bays we've got that open up to us for our strike craft early on, what the start ones are, and what they're going to get in the second and third bays, basically up to sort of command center 5. So you're opening these up within the first day or two fairly easily, and we'll just look at those little sort of lower level T1 and T2 craft. And basically let's just sort of go in on that so that we can have a slightly better look at it up on your screens. So there we go, those are the ones we're looking at, and we'll just run through those basically piece by piece inside the bays within the game. So Arcos, I've only ever played Arcos in the seasons that have been launched. I've played variously Tyrannus, I think, and perhaps it was Eldarin in the early testing of the game about a year ago. But we tended to stick with Arcos simply because we've got the Arcos Bay open up first, then the Ograx Bay, and then Tyrannus. And what have we got as our very first ship that are going out on those first hits? Well, we've unfortunately got the Satire, which hasn't got the greatest defense, hasn't got the greatest initiative, and really hasn't got the greatest of health. And why do we do that? Well, it's unaffected by stun, the defense is up 20%, so that goes up a little bit. It's not fantastic, and you want to move on from these as fast as you humanly can. Initially use officers that boost up your defense, your strike craft defense. Certainly don't even worry about initiative. You're never going to get close to some of the other things that you're going to hit. You're always going to be going second. I think there's going to be tiles where your initiative is about 80 on the strike craft. They're always going to go first, so it's not the greatest to start with. But then first T2 that opens up, we're actually getting a little bit more respectable. The initiative's gone up slightly. The damage is really good here, and on here we've got damage received from long range strike of minus 30%. That's actually worth something. The defense isn't too shabby. If we can get more than 8 on our initiative added there via our officers, then we're starting to do okay. But then we're going to kind of move up here, and you'll see I only ever put 1 point in this second bay. We get the Wyvern. Again, it's not fantastic, but it actually does some additional energy damage. But the real reason for going Arcos in the first place is to be the first in the game to open up the Harpies. Initially you get the Raven. Even the Raven's pretty good because you've got this follow-up attack. The only thing that stops that is the fact that if someone counters it currently, I don't know if that's intended, then it's not going to hit again. There aren't too many things you'll come up against early game where that gets countered. And then we finally come to the Harpy, and basically unless you're hitting anything that stuns or confuses you, and that renders you useless for the rest of the entire battle, a bar gun will glitch I'm sure, but one that's not fixed yet, then you're really pumping out the damage here. 185 to 202, that's some of the highest in the game. Yes, it's very squidgy, yes, the initiative's not very high, but if you've got almost 100% chance to get an extra attack in, doing 2 of those with this sort of damage output, that's absolute gold. And you're reducing the target's defense by 50% for a round, so you get that second hit in, they're toast. So that's Arcos, and the primary reason for doing it is to get these Harpies early on, earlier than everyone else, and because also as Arcos you end up opening up the Ograx Bay, and the Ograx obviously is just so well known for the Cyclops, so you get them fairly early on. That's fantastic. Moving on to Ograx, if you happen to be playing that. First up, what are you looking at here? You've got a close range light, defense and health not great, initiative's a bit higher than the T1 in Arcos, so that's pretty good. Thermal damage received minus 20%. I mean, that's fairly hopeless really. You're not going to be too worried about that. And then we move on at the T2. We're getting good defense and health. Initiatives starting to go up, and we're actually dealing thermal damage, which is gold because that ignores all armor. And I do believe we're coming into the medium range. Having a medium range early on in this. You get this great defense, great health, initiative's pretty solid. So that Serpent early on, damage received minus 10%, that is really, really solid one to have. So you can see why Arcos is the kind of Ograx is the kind of go-to on this. Tyrannus also do quite well in terms of their early ships. There's not great here with this light strike craft, but what you have got here is basically another medium ship here open to you early, so that's good sort of early game tanking there. Defense is 158, health is high, initiative's even higher than the Ograx, and damage received minus 10% once again. The damage output is not great, but you stick that onto a ship, you've got a good draw ship there, or good draw battle group there, and you'll come out, hopefully, if you've got lots of healing, doing reasonably well. It just might take a bit longer. Their first T2 available is not great. It's 10% chance to evade damage early on, but that's all damage. But really you're playing Tyrannus to sort of open up this line here, the Battler, and then eventually to get all the way up to the Inquisitor, it was actually pretty good. It's still got a little bit of a bug around it in that the first attack is always a normal one, but after that it starts to do its target prioritization. Unfortunately, I think that's been loaded as a kind of, excuse the nerdiness, but that's been loaded as an active skill rather than a passive pre-battle skill. So moving on next to Omega, and it kind of looks okay on paper, but it's not great. You've got a medium strike craft that comes up fairly early on. The damage is half decent for a medium strike craft. The initiative's not great, and you get your damage received as well. The very first one you've got available to you, though, unlike some of the others, it's got a really great defense to start with. The problem with Omega is that all the other bays kind of, are not opening up that well for you. You've got a health of 270 though, so you've got this really high defense, but this really abysmal health and a superb damage output. So they're very, very squidgy. If you can protect them, Omega's not such a bad choice to go early on. And then when we go into their next, their T2 long range line, that damage is significant. We've got a counter attack there, so that's going to work well with a Sunder certainly, or anything that gets a heal when it actually hits out. And then you go up to the black hat there, which is actually starting to come into its own. They're not too bad. And what have we got here? Medium, well, we mentioned that earlier. So yeah, it's going to have good defense and good health. But when you just have a look at that compared to this one here, that's actually really shows you quite a good defense there compared to most of the other T1 strike craft or light strike craft. Vanguard, of course, now it's coming into its own, really. The Morning Star has been partially fixed. It is picking up some of the skill attacks, unfortunately, rather than standard attacks from the opponent, so it might get creamed a little bit earlier than you'd hoped, but it does stop you from having all your other strike craft pummeled, I guess. So it's bringing up this kind of, it takes all damage from standard attack on behalf of allies. It's not entirely true, taking a lot more than that. But yeah, defense 510 goes up to about 835, I think, with the first 3 rounds, and health of 3,600. Fantastic. But what do we get at the beginning? We actually get the dagger. The defense is average, but the health is okay. Initiative's not great, but it's a fairly solid, and on hit enemy target defense minus 20%. That's actually really good for your first up ships. That's one of the best first up ships. And then again, that goes into the broadsword. Damage from long range strike craft minus 30. Well, yeah, not to be sniffed at. Defense isn't too bad. Health is okay. Initiative's quite good. But that little dagger up there that's really useful up front. So Vanguard's become a really kind of viable choice for your faction or for your start zone. And then you get early option of a medium strike craft, so you can start tanking stuff on ships, and that's really useful. After that we go to Eldarin and have a look at them. Now Eldarin not too bad as well for a initial start faction, defense 105, but again we've got this kind of like low health here, but a huge damage output. So you know, that's the same as some of the others that we've looked at. With your officers, where you've got this kind of like this really low health, if you can then, you know, pump up those defense stats a bit further, and just pray you don't run into anything that's doing elemental damage, because they're going to die real quick without that defense up there. We've also got here the T2 is again huge damage output here. It's got really good initiative, so these are worth getting into and having. They're going to put their damage out before the enemy on the tile is. And then I believe is a medium. Yep, we've got a medium here as their first one in the second bay. And again, they're going to tank. The health here is not quite as high as some of the others on that initial tanking, and the defense is not great, but you have got your minus 10% here, and you are still doing a sort of half decent damage. I would stick with the first bay personally. Early on, the Eldarin Bay 2 comes into its own eventually with basically the T3 units, and these are not too shabby at all. You've got your damage received minus 10%, and here you've got against heavy strikecraft damage plus 20%. That's really something if you can load that up perhaps on something like a Cypher, which is already going to get a skill that's got additional damage against the heavier strikecraft. So it's worth having. Terra's actually got a really nice first up ship. I'll be honest, I'm kind of a bit jealous when I'm playing Arcos and I've got something so squidgy. They get a medium close range strikecraft first off the bat, defense 158, health 810. And there'll be the standard minus 10% for a medium. That is superb off the bat, and the initiative's good too. It has a horrible damage output, but if you've got ships that are actually capital ship is dealing out the damage, then that is an excellent strikecraft to have as the first one available to you, perhaps actually the best in the game in my opinion. We then move that one up, and again we're still on medium, so we've still got this great defense and great health. Initiative's gone up a bit, and this time it prioritizes enemies with the lowest health against close range strikecraft damage dealt plus 10%, and that skill actually works. I've tested it out recently. It might be a little bit iffy in some of the calculations, but that's a really good solid first couple of strikecraft to have. And then we move on to the buzzard here, and again defense is pretty solid, but the health is awful, 270, and however it does have the shield disruptor, so you pair that up with some of your other ships here in the Terror Squadrons, you're gonna do pretty well. And Stonar, poor old Stonar, what have they got? Much maligned, so very average defense, health, initiative, nothing particularly to write home about. Thermal damage received minus 2%. Well, that's absolutely no use to you whatsoever unless you're fighting some werewolves. And then the next one coming up here, again, what have we got? Standard attacks deal thermal damage. That's actually pretty useful. Get that fully up, that's 100% thermal damage, so that's not too shabby at all. But again, the defense and the health are very average. And then finally we can have a look at this, and we've got a long range light strikecraft. Look at that damage output there, 132 to 144. Defense is pretty okay, but again the health is pretty crappy really. So when you're coming up with these here, put in a bit more, try and pump up their defense if you can, and avoid anything that's dishing out elemental damage, because you're just going to go down like a stone in water. So that's a quick zip through each of those sort of start units for that, and we're probably going to call it a day there. I'm hoping that some of this stuff has been useful for you. Do hit me up if you want to know anything more about this, but really the focus was to give you some idea of the start factions and how they might be. Have a little bit of a look at what is coming for us in season 3. Really looking forward to seeing everybody in the same server. That's going to be huge. We've got, at least we know, 1,300 active players coming in. That's about 3 or 4 times more than we used to, certainly. Those of us that have been playing the last couple of seasons. Really looking forward to it, and please don't pick on me. I might be doing something on YouTube, but I don't deserve that. Thanks very much for watching, guys. Cheers. Silk out.